I'm not afraid. I wear God's armor. I do not fear what man can do to me.
Katharine Hepburn was Hollywood's most unconventional star, a woman who refused to play by anyone's rules. Over her 7-decade career, she won 4 Academy Awards and became a legend, not just for her talent, but for her fierce independence. But what made Hepburn truly extraordinary was the way she moved through the lives of some of Hollywood's greatest leading men, leaving each of them changed by knowing her. Some loved her for years, some for months, and one loved her for the rest of his life.
Everyone and his uncle thinks you're wrong, and you still think, well, God damn it, I don't think I'm wrong. I think I'm right, and I'm going to do it.
Spencer Tracy. When Katharine Hepburn first heard she might be cast opposite Spencer Tracy in Woman of the Year in 1942, she asked about the height difference. According to various versions of the story, she either said she feared she was too tall for him, or someone else mentioned it. Tracy, or possibly director Joseph Mankiewicz, replied that he would cut her down to size. They met at MGM. She was 34, recently divorced, fiercely independent. He was 41, married to Louise Treadwell since 1923, father to 2 children, including a deaf son. Tracy was a Catholic who drank heavily and battled severe depression. He was also one of the finest actors of his generation. Hepburn said she knew right away that she found him irresistible. Within a week, they were calling each other Spence and Kate. Tracy remained married throughout their 26-year relationship. He and Louise had been living largely separate lives since the 1930s, but neither pursued divorce. Some have said it was his Catholic faith that kept him from divorcing, but under California law at the time, he didn't have grounds anyway. It had to be Louise's decision, and she chose not to make it. Hepburn never interfered. Tracy wanted to keep the relationship private, and so they maintained separate residences, were careful not to be seen together in public, and built a life in the margins of Hollywood respectability. Hepburn devoted herself to making Tracy's life easier. She described him as tortured, a man who suffered from alcoholism and deep moodiness. She took care of him, adapted to his preferences, and put his needs ahead of her own career. Friends watched her transformation with a mixture of admiration and concern. Lauren Bacall later wrote that Hepburn was blindingly in love with Tracy. They made 9 films together over the years, their on-screen chemistry so natural that audiences assumed they were simply playing themselves. Off-screen, the relationship was more difficult. Tracy's drinking created problems, and there were infidelities on both sides. He had an affair with Ingrid Bergman during the filming of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Hepburn became emotionally involved with Adlai Stevenson during his presidential campaigns in the 50s. But she always came back to Tracy, and he to her. Their final film together was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967. Tracy was very ill during production, able to work only a few hours each day. He knew he was dying. 17 days after filming wrapped on June 10, 1967, Tracy died of a heart attack at the home he and Hepburn shared. She was with him when he died, but did not attend the funeral out of respect for his family. Hepburn later wrote that she loved Spencer Tracy, that his interests and demands came first, and that she would have done anything for him. Cary Grant. Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn met when they made Sylvia Scarlett together in 1935. It was an odd little film that flopped at the box office, but launched Grant's real career, showing for the first time that he wasn't just any old leading man. The two became close friends during filming, a friendship that would last the rest of their lives. Grant was the one who introduced Hepburn to Howard Hughes, playing Cupid for his 2 closest friends. There have been persistent rumors over the years that Grant and Hepburn had a romantic relationship, but both always insisted they were simply friends. Grant was famously bisexual and had his own complicated personal life, including his long relationship with Randolph Scott. Hepburn appreciated Grant's wit, his elegance, and his understanding of what it meant to create a persona for public consumption while hiding your true self. They worked together on several films including Bringing Up Baby, Holiday, and The Philadelphia Story, developing a screen chemistry that was electric but based more on friendship and mutual respect than romance. In Bringing Up Baby, their screwball comedy timing was perfect, each able to match the other's energy and intelligence. In Holiday, they played characters fighting against societal expectations, a theme that resonated deeply with both actors in their real lives. Grant married 5 times and struggled throughout his life with questions about his sexuality and his identity. Hepburn remained one of his closest confidants, someone who understood the peculiar demands of stardom without judgment. She later said that Grant had more female friends than male friends, and that women trusted him because he understood them. When she needed someone she could trust completely, someone who would never judge her choices or try to change her, she turned to Grant. He died in 1986, and Hepburn mourned him as one of the great friends of her life, a man who had shown her that friendship between a man and a woman could be as deep and meaningful as any romance. John Ford. John Ford was one of Hollywood's greatest directors, a man who made westerns and war films, a director's director who worked primarily with male stars. In 1936, producer Pandro Berman chose Ford to direct Hepburn in Mary of Scotland, despite her preference for George Cukor. Ford was married to Mary McBride Smith and had 2 children. He was also a profoundly unhappy man and a heavy drinker. During the filming of Mary of Scotland, Ford became entranced with Hepburn. He admired her feistiness and irreverence, qualities his wife lacked. The production was difficult. Ford didn't think the story was strong and didn't like the blank verse dialogue. At one point during filming, they were scheduled to shoot intimate scenes between Mary and Bothwell on the ramparts of Dunbar Castle. Ford wanted to drop the scenes as unnecessary soppiness. Hepburn regarded them as central to the film. After a heated exchange, Ford handed her the script and megaphone, walked off the set, and told her to direct the scene herself. She did. Ford's direction of Hepburn throughout the film reveals his feelings for her. There are a disproportionate number of close-ups, the camera lingering upon her face with an attentiveness granted to no one else in the cast. By the time filming was completed on April 23, 1936, Ford was in love with Hepburn. They went to New York together and then to visit her family in Connecticut. According to some accounts, they did not consummate the relationship because Ford wanted everything, a divorce and marriage to Hepburn, or nothing at all. Ford's wife geared up for battle, holding the trump cards of Ford's Roman Catholic beliefs and his love of his children. The relationship lasted about 6 months before Ford's wife made him end it. Ford joined the Navy during World War II and was gone from Hollywood for 4 years. Hepburn, lonely after Ford ended their relationship, began dating Howard Hughes in January 1937. Ford never divorced his wife, and Hepburn moved on to Spencer Tracy. But Ford's feelings for Hepburn never entirely faded. In 1973, when Ford was dying, his grandson Dan brought Hepburn to see him. Their conversation was recorded, though they didn't know the tape was running. Ford told Hepburn he loved her. She replied that it was mutual. He asked if anyone was listening, and she said no. They talked about golf, about making Mary of Scotland, and then it turned intimate. The tape was left running, capturing what was meant to be a private goodbye. Ford died later that year. Hepburn attended his funeral and wept for the man who had loved her 40 years earlier. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn became close friends while filming The African Queen in 1951. Bogart was married to Lauren Bacall, and Hepburn was devoted to Spencer Tracy, so there was never a romantic relationship between them. But the bond they formed was deep and lasting. Bogart admired Hepburn's professionalism and her refusal to compromise her standards. Hepburn appreciated Bogart's no-nonsense approach to acting and his dry wit. The African Queen was filmed on location in Africa under brutal conditions. The cast and crew dealt with oppressive heat, swarms of insects, contaminated water, and rampant dysentery. Bogart and director John Huston spent much of their free time drinking, while Hepburn drank only boiled water and ate carefully prepared food. She remained healthy throughout the shoot. Bogart joked that Hepburn was the only one who didn't get sick because she never drank anything stronger than water, while everyone else got dysentery from the local supply. Despite the difficult conditions and their very different approaches to life, the friendship between Bogart and Hepburn deepened. They respected each other as actors and as people who understood the cost of maintaining integrity in Hollywood. Neither was particularly interested in the social demands of stardom. Both valued honesty over charm. Bogart and his wife Bacall became close with both Hepburn and Tracy, one of the few couples who knew about and openly accepted their relationship. After Bogart was diagnosed with esophageal cancer in 1956, Hepburn visited him regularly. Bacall later wrote about how devoted Hepburn had been during that terrible time, how she came to see Bogart when he was at his worst, wasted away to almost nothing. Bogart died on January 14, 1957. Hepburn grieved for him as a true friend, one of the few people in Hollywood who had never asked her to be anything other than herself. Bacall would later write that she had never seen anyone as blindingly in love as Hepburn was with Tracy, and Hepburn would write that Bogart had been one of the few men she completely trusted. Laurence Olivier. Laurence Olivier and Katharine Hepburn never had a romantic relationship, but their professional collision in 1960 became one of the most talked-about theatrical disasters of the era. They worked together on a summer stock production of Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra at the American Shakespeare Festival in Stratford, Connecticut. Olivier was one of the greatest stage actors of his generation, a master of classical theater who had conquered both stage and screen. Hepburn was equally accomplished, but approaching Shakespeare from a different tradition, more emotional and intuitive than Olivier's technical precision. The production was troubled from the start. Olivier was drinking heavily, struggling in his marriage to Vivien Leigh, and not particularly interested in directing. Hepburn had strong ideas about how to play Cleopatra and bristled at Olivier's suggestions. They clashed repeatedly during rehearsals. Olivier wanted control and precision. Hepburn wanted freedom and spontaneity. The reviews were brutal. Critics savaged both the production and Hepburn's performance, calling her Cleopatra unconvincing and Olivier's direction uninspired. It was one of the few genuine failures in Hepburn's long career, and she never quite forgave Olivier for it. But there was respect beneath the conflict. Olivier understood Hepburn's commitment to her craft, and Hepburn recognized Olivier's genius even when she disagreed with his methods. They never worked together again, but they remained cordial when their paths crossed over the years. Olivier died in 1989, and Hepburn, who would outlive him by 14 years, remembered him as a brilliant actor who had brought out the worst in her Cleopatra, but who had never been anything less than honest about what he thought she needed to do.